The 49ers overhauled the defensive line for 2024. But do new faces equal new results? All that and more on this episode of 49ers Cutback.
From the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for joining me. Time to talk about the San Francisco 49ers defensive line because the 49ers had to make some moves. Now, some of them casualty as far as caps. You got to worry about salary cap. Some of it was improving at the positions, and the 49ers brought in a ton of faces, new guys, and of course, there's depth new guys as well. They went out and got some undrafted free agents. But on the free agent market, they didn't play it safe. They went out and got a big-time defensive end in Leonard Floyd. They got a guy they felt could take over the Arden key role in ETR Gross-Matos. But then they couldn't sit pat at defensive line, at defensive tackle either. Of course, them and Eric Armstead couldn't come to an agreement on a new contract. The 49ers were trying to bring his cap number way down. Eric Armstead, of course, wants to keep his number up because once you're valued at one number, you're not going to be able to get that big money. So Armstead and the 49ers decided to go their separate ways. And with that, the 49ers had to make another move. But it wasn't just Armstead that left on the interior defensive line, but also Javon Kinlaw left. So the San Francisco 49ers had to fill not just a starting defensive tackle role, but also the first sub in as Javon Kinlaw moves on to the New York Jets and gets a good contract there. So the 49ers had a lot of things to do. But when you bring players in, you know what you were getting from the players before, but what are you going to get from the players that you bring in? Are they going to be able to play at the level of the guys you had before? Do new faces equal new results? Well, I would say yes. The odds of it finishing exactly the same, getting the same production like you were getting from Eric Armstead, probably not good. The same type of production you were getting from Chase Young and Randy Gregory with Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos is probably going to be drastically different. With every single year comes a new set of obstacles that you're going to have to overcome. And in this case, the 49ers had wholesale changes along the defensive line. Defensive line has been one of the things the 49ers have looked to continue to improve every single year, and it really has been a mainstay since John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over San Francisco, an emphasis on D-line. They made an emphasis, and they made some moves, and we're going to go through whether these new faces are going to equal new results and what those results could be for the 49ers. We're going to kind of go through some of the quotes that we got from Chris Kasarik. It's going to be a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys all joining me. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening on audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe. Please give it a 5-star rating. If you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. From baseball, golf, soccer, right up to all the fights in the UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. So the San Francisco 49ers have been looking for an edge defender opposite of Nick Bosa that can make a huge impact since D Ford got injured. And the 49ers had traded for D Ford heading into that 2019 season, and then they paired him with Nick Bosa, and everyone knew what type of potential that could be. But when you put it together with that interesting ingredients of Buckner and Armstead, You had one of the best defensive lines in the entire league. They were really putting the pressure on quarterbacks, and they were tough to deal with. And then D Ford got hurt. And unfortunately, the 49ers haven't been able to find that guy. They tried Samson Ebukam. Ebukam did pretty good, but he was a 4.5, 5 sack guy. They tried Charles Amenahu. Amenahu, 4.5, 5 sack guy. They haven't been able to get that guy. So last year they traded for Chase Young, and Chase Young came to town and ended up finishing the season with 7.5 sacks, most of those in Washington, but a legitimate star player opposite of Bosa. But I still don't think they got the production they're looking for opposite of Bosa. They need a guy that can put pressure with speed, but can also be able to set the edge against the run, but just be somebody that offensive coordinators are worried about. If you can consistently chip and slide protection towards Nick Bosa the whole time, well, then he's not going to be as dynamic because they can solo one-on-one your guy on the other side. 49ers don't want that. And of course, you couldn't solo Chase Young all the time, but occasionally you could. So the 49ers go out and they get a real veteran by every sense of the word. When you get a guy like Leonard Floyd, you bring in a guy that understands responsibilities of playing in this league, understands how to use his hands, understands when to put pressure on the quarterback and how to do it. And this guy is just a real good player. And I think that's the best way to say it is he's just a real good player. He just does things the right way. So you're comparing him to Chase Young because that number one role opposite of Nick Bosa is the job that he's going to have to do. But Chris Kasterik had this to say when he was talking to Matt Barrows of The Athletic. He said, I thought he was the most explosive rusher in that draft when he came out. So Chris Kasterik has said he does this in the past. He likes to find players he feel will be a good system fit. And even when they get drafted by other teams, he keeps tabs on them. He sees how they're doing. He watches for their availability. Then when they become available, he tries to bring them to San Francisco because he knows that they fit within the scheme and he believes they can do a lot of things. So the fact that he believed he was going to be that explosive is very important because they need somebody explosive opposite of Nick Bosa. And Samson Ebukam was an explosive player. He was athletic. He was fast. He just couldn't consistently win. Well, when you're looking over at Leonard Floyd, this is a guy that can consistently win. But what kind of role is he going to play in San Francisco? I thought this was interesting because the 49ers put Samson Ebukam's hand in the ground. He was used to being a stand-up 3-4 defensive end. Chase Young did that sometimes. His hand was in the ground. Randy Gregory had played in a 3-4 defense. He was used to standing up. They put his hand in the ground. What are they going to do with Leonard Floyd? Is Floyd going to be able to stand up sometimes the way D Ford did? Or is he going to put his hand in the ground like the players that came before him? Well, here is what Chris Kasterik told Matt Barrows. Sometimes we'll stand him up like you saw D Ford in 19 and 20 standing up on the edge. Anytime a player is really good at something, I'd be an idiot to take it away from him and say, you can't do that. We're always known as a hand in the dirt defense. But when you have a unique skill set that can excel from a 2-point stance, you don't want to just totally take that away from a player. So this is Chris Kasterik recognizing the unique abilities of Leonard Floyd and saying, hey, we're not going to just make you fit our defense, but we're also going to fit our defense to you. We normally like our guys to have their hands in the ground because of certain things we do in run fits and certain things we do as far as defensive scheme. But there's going to be times we're going to allow you to stand up because you know what? You're pretty gosh darn good when you do that. So I think the Chris Kasterik's thought process is right here. And when you look at what you've gotten over the years from Leonard Floyd, you've got a consistent player who not just plays play in and play out, but produces year after year after year. He played in 17 games and he had 16 starts for the Bills last year. He had 32 tackles, 10.5 sacks. But we talked about the production opposite of Bosa. 10.5 is the most that the 49ers have had opposite of Bosa in a long time. Because you look over at Samson Ebukam never got over 5. Charles Amenahu never got over 5. Of course, Chase Young at 7.5, but most of those were in Washington. They haven't been able to get a guy that could produce opposite of Bosa like this until they got Leonard Floyd. He had 9 tackles for loss, a forced fumble, and 1 pass defense. His 10.5 sacks is tied a career high, and he also started in both of his postseason games last year and had 4 tackles. So you've got a guy that not only understands the division because he used to play for the Los Angeles Rams, he was very familiar with Brandon Staley because Staley was the defensive coordinator when he was there in 2020. You also have a guy that played for the Buffalo Bills and played in the playoffs last year, knows what playoffs are like. Of course, he understands playoffs as well from his time with the Rams. So division familiarity, the ability to get double-digit sacks. I mean, it's just everything you want from an edge rusher. A guy that consistently plays, a guy that consistently produces, and a guy that can make plays opposite of Nick Bosa. So I think when you're looking at it, was this an upgrade over Chase Young? I think you have to say yes. Could Chase Young be the type of guy that blows up and gets 14 sacks in a season? Absolutely, because Chase Young has an immense skill set. I mean, the guy could be dynamic. He just hasn't been able to put it all together now. So as far as overall ceiling, Chase Young might have a better overall ceiling. As far as overall production opposite of Nick Bosa moving forward, Leonard Floyd is a definite upgrade because you know you're going to get consistent play. You're going to get better run stopping ability. You're going to get a guy that tackles well, a guy that they feel they can use in a couple of different roles. So consistency in double-digit sacks is exactly what the 49ers need. Leonard Floyd is probably an upgrade over Chase Young. So I think in this case, when it comes to Leonard Floyd, a new face does equal new results, and it's in a positive manner. But they weren't done at defensive end. They also went and got Yetur Gross-Matos. And Gross-Matos is going to fit a particular role. Now, we seen Clelin Ferrell last year play the base down 4-3 defensive end pretty well. Played the run well, got after the quarterback a little. But if you think that's what Gross-Matos is going to be, he's not. He's going to be so much more than just what Ferrell was for this defense. He's also going to fill the Arden Key role. And the Arden Key role has been a significant role in the 49ers defense for a long time. They started doing this and bringing defensive ends in 2021 and putting them over the guards and letting them really get after the quarterback. Arden Key did it the best out of any of the guys the 49ers have used in that role. Last year, that role was used barely. I mean, minuscule. They did not really get into that role very much. Randy Gregory used a little bit, but really they got no production out of that particular role. Charles Omenihu did it pretty good in his time, but the 49ers were looking for somebody that could fit it. And Gross-Matos not only can do it, and not only do you have to project it, but he actually showed it last season in his time with Carolina. They used him in that role, and he was very impactful. So the 49ers know what they're going to get with Gross-Matos as far as his ability to play outside and set the edge in the run, but then line up over a guard and be able to win dynamically when he gets on his edges, using his great quickness to be able to get these guys going. Lateral quickness against guards is a real problem for offensive guards. And Gross-Matos, he only played in 12 games last year, but he had 4.5 sacks. So 12 games, 4.5 sacks, that's a career high. You're adding some impact with this guy to your football team. And Randy Gregory had a pretty good season last year. He had 3.5 sacks, 2.5 of those with the 49ers. But when you're talking about Gross-Matos, he's going to be able to help this football team in a big way because he fills that Arden Key role. And the 49ers need someone to fill that role. That has been a missing ingredient of the defense in 2023. Of course, they had it with D'Amico Ryans. He had Omenihu. He had Arden Key. But also, when you look at last year, they just didn't have it. So the 49ers got to figure this thing out. They got to get a guy that can make an impact, and Gross-Matos is going to be that guy. But Gross-Matos is also a guy that can make plays on the outside. He can set the edge in the run and make tackles. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation. I can give you the sack production of Randy Gregory, and we know Gregory, we wanted him to be better. But I can give you the sack production of Gregory and Clelin Ferrell with the run-stopping ability of Ferrell. So you're getting two for the price of one. And the 49ers definitely did value that, taking their money and putting it into two defensive ends to have a couple of guys that can really kickstart this rotation. Because the 49ers couldn't afford to count on the young guys that they have. Robert Beal Jr., Drake Jackson. What were they going to get from those guys? Well, we know inconsistencies. Of course, Beal Jr. had an injury in training camp. Drake Jackson got hurt during the season. We haven't really got to see those guys live up to expectations yet. Beal Jr., of course, just doesn't have very many opportunities, but Jackson has had opportunities. So you got to make sure you're ready at the top and front part of this depth chart. The 49ers did it with Gross-Matos and with Leonard Floyd. Now, Gross-Matos is a little bit harder to predict. Now, I love the skill set and I love the position versatility that he's going to be able to play inside and outside. That's exactly what you want from a defensive end, because now if he's rushing next to Bosa with Leonard Floyd on the other side and Javon Hargrave, you've got four legitimate pass rushers that can get home to the quarterback at any single moment, and athleticism to be able to run stunts with those defensive linemen. So you can do a lot of twists, a lot of stunts, and really put pressure on an offensive line. So I get what they're doing with Gross-Matos. I think the new face could mean new production. What it definitely means is new wrinkle to the scheme than what we saw in 2023. Nick Sorensen can now go back to what DeMeco Ryans was doing, and Chris Kasarik can now go back to having a defensive line that he can kind of play games with and manipulate different matchups with defensive line compared to offensive linemen. It's going to be a lot of fun. So right now, the 49ers have added two new faces that we've talked about, and so far it's been very, very good. Now is where it gets a little bit more difficult, because the blueprint has moved on. And Eric Armstead was a consistent force in the 49ers locker room and the 49ers football field for a long time. Not to mention his attention to detail, his film work, his work in concert with Chris Kasarik, talking about different looks, different ways to attack as a defensive line. He did a lot for this 49ers football team. And the 49ers defense definitely needed him. They played 12 games last year. He had 5 sacks. And we know that he can be tremendously productive when he's on the field. The problem was he missed games over the last seasons. Last 2 seasons weren't always the best look when it came to what you were going to get from Eric Armstead. Now, of course, how do you replace Eric Armstead? It was tough. When Buckner got traded to the Colts, 49ers had a first-round pick they used on Javon Kinlaw. But Javon Kinlaw wasn't exactly Buckner. And now that you're losing Armstead, you're not getting exactly that. Like when you looked at defensive end, it was easy to find that these could be upgrades. When you look at defensive line, it's a little bit tougher because Eric Armstead's a legitimate Pro Bowl caliber player. Now, what you're bringing in, though, is you're bringing in 2 guys who started football games in the NFL for their football team. I mean, Jordan Elliott, who I'll talk about in a minute, he had 31 starts. So these guys are very good veterans, and we'll go through what exactly they bring to the table and how they're going to help this football team. But it's harder to find better results with Eric Armstead off the team. So it's going to be something the 49ers definitely have to work on. But here is what Chris Kasarik had to say about Malik Collins. He says, I've always liked his skill set. I think his skill set is tailor-made to play the attack style nature we play. And he's played in some attack schemes throughout his career last year. He was down there in Houston. There will be a lot of familiarity from working with DeMeco and those guys in Houston, and then coming here and doing very similar things. He also talked about with Matt Barrows from The Athletic that he loved his explosiveness. He liked him since he came out and was drafted by Dallas. His ability to reset the line of scrimmage and reestablish it in the backfield. So his explosiveness, getting off the football, creating havoc, is something that he likes from Malik Collins. And those types of players fit very well in the 49ers scheme. Those guys are built with quickness, and the ability to get in there and make some plays is definitely what the 49ers need. Is Collins going to be able to be a Eric Armstead double-digit sack guy? No, he's not. That's not exactly what he does. He had 5 sacks last year, which was a career high. But 5 sacks from the interior part of your defensive line is not bad, especially if those are early down sacks. And why do I say early down sacks? Well, Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave definitely would have been on 3rd down. That's not exactly what you're going to want from Malik Collins. Of course, there could be times he's in on third down, third and medium. You're worried about a run. You leave him in because he's a better run stopper than a guy like Gross-Matos. But the truth is, your best pass rushing unit could have Gross-Matos in there and not Malik Collins. So that's not the overall number one thing you're looking for. You're looking for a guy that can play balanced defense, good against the run, good as a pass rusher. And I think that's what the 49ers feel they got. I also feel that they believe they've got a player that if he's in their scheme and doing the things and being coached the way that Chris Kacerek coaches him, that number is going to go from 5 to 7.5, and that he's going to be able to have tremendous output for what he's going to be able to do for this team. I don't think that you can compare apples to apples when it comes to Malik Collins to Eric Armstead. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to take a full group to be able to replace what Armstead brought to your team. But the one thing that Malik Collins will add to this team, hopefully, is consistency as far as being on the field every single week compared to Armstead. And it's not like Armstead wasn't healthy. There was a long stretch there where he stayed healthy, and he did a great job. He played through injuries. No one can ever question his toughness. But over the last 2 seasons, he missed a lot of football games. And last year, that made it tougher on Hargrave. And Hargrave wasn't able to produce the way that he normally does when he played with Philly. 7.5 sacks for Hargrave last year, still a great number. But 49ers want even more production. So they bring in Malik Collins. And Collins played in 16 games last year for the Houston Texans. He had 41 tackles, 8 tackles for loss, those 5 sacks. And he also, when it came to career year, he had a career year, 41 tackles, number 1. He's had in his career 5 sacks, tied his career high, so he's done it a couple of times. And he also played in the postseason. So once again, veteran who's played in some big-time football games. 49ers, new face, new result. It's going to be different. It's not going to be the same markup that you got with Armstead. Armstead never missed tackles, ever. He was just special that way. The long arms, the ability to make tackles, he just didn't miss tackles. He also produced more sacks from the inside because of his length and speed and size. Combo is just different than other players around the league. He really is a unicorn that way. So, are you going to get it the same way? No. It's going to take a group of guys to do it. So, it's going to take Malik Collins, and it's going to take Jordan Elliott. And Jordan Elliott is going to be replacing Javon Kinlaw. Or is he? Because there's going to be a competition between Malik Collins and Jordan Elliott for the starting defensive tackle position. Because Jordan Elliott's been starting in Cleveland in a very similar scheme for 31 straight games. Since 2022, he's been starting football games in Cleveland. And now he's coming to San Francisco, and you think he's just going to be there to play Kinlaw? Here's where you get the upgrade. And I like Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw battled through a lot of injuries. He played really tough. I think he's a good dude. I think he's a good football player. I think he deserved the money he got from the Jets. But Javon Kinlaw last year was very good as far as a pass rusher. 3.5 sacks on the interior part of the defensive line is a good number. The problem was he's not as good in the run game as I think people expected him, me included. He just didn't measure up. Well, now you're getting Jordan Elliott, and Jordan Elliott is 12th in the NFL in run stop ability at a 40% win rate. So you're adding a real run stopper, yet he only had 1 sack less than Kinlaw last year. Upgrade in run defense, and not really that much of a downgrade when it comes to pass rush. And why do I say not much? He got less production than Kinlaw last year. Well, the reason being, he didn't play for Chris Kacerek. He didn't play in the 49ers attacking style defense with the players he's going to be playing with. He's going to be rushing with guys like Hargrave and Bosa and Gross-Matos and Leonard Floyd. Those guys are going to take the attention of other players. And he had Myles Garrett. He had a very good defensive line. Don't get me wrong. But I just think it's different playing in this scheme where they just let you go. And so I'm curious to see how he operates in this scheme. But you had one legit starter last year in Eric Armstead and Hargrave. So you had 2 starters. What I'm talking about is the guys that left. Kinlaw, not so much a starter. Everyone saw him as a backup. But now you've brought in 2 guys with competition. So when you start putting it Armstead and Kinlaw versus what you're going to get from Collins and Elliott, I think that's when it starts getting close to competition. Defensive ends, it was easy to figure out the 49ers had something there. Defensive tackles a lot tougher because you're replacing Armstead. So you're going to get your production differently. Jordan Elliott's going to stop the run the way Armstead did, what you needed. He's going to be equivalent when it comes to pass rush the way Kinlaw was. Malik Collins is not going to be as good as Armstead rushing the passer or stopping the run because Armstead is Armstead. But those guys have to figure it out. Now, when you're looking at the sum of all parts, will these new faces equal better results? We know it's going to be new results, but will it be better results? It has the potential to be better results. You have two guys on the edge, especially, that the 49ers upgraded their edge position over the last several years. And like I said, I like WCOM and I like Charles Omenihu. But Leonard Floyd and Gross-Matos have the ability to really change the game for the 49ers. If Floyd has just a normal career year, 10.5 sacks, opposite of Bosa, and Gross-Matos improves on what he did last year, he only played in 12 games and 4.5 sacks. Let's say that goes up to 6.5, and you're going to get 17 sacks opposite of Bosa, and that's not including what Robert Beal or what you would get from Drake Jackson if they were playing. You've got to feel comfortable that you're getting more pass pressure, you're getting more production from those edge defenders. That's going to make it a little bit easier for Nick Bosa. When it comes to defensive line, I think it's a little bit harder. I'm hoping that those guys being able to play consistent reps and the fact that some of both of them, their starters, are going to be a little bit better than Armstead and Kinlaw. But replacing Armstead is going to be very difficult for the 49ers. I think the 49ers knew they didn't want to let Armstead go. Unfortunately, that's just the way it worked. So Armstead is gone, and now you've got these two guys that are coming in to compete. The good news is they both play tough, and they both play aggressive. One of them is a very good run stopper in Jordan Elliott. So if you've been worried about the 49ers defensive line stopping the run, you just seen 12th best defensive tackle in the league. We're talking about him maybe being a backup, and he's 12th best in the league stopping the run. And Malik Collins, who's been around this league for a while. As far as pass rush, Jordan Elliott needs to get better pass rushing, but Malik Collins needs to get better run stopping. Together, maybe they make the perfect player. So, yes, new faces, new results. I think on the edge, it could be better results than we've ever saw. Defensive line, they got some work to do. Some of that could be the fourth defensive tackle. Who's it going to be? Kevin Givens, Kalia Davis? Going to be Evan Anderson? That's going to be a question for another day. But 49ers have a lot of new faces, and they're expecting a lot of new production from them. I'm really excited about it. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Please let me know what you think in the comment section about these guys. Do you think the same way as me? Defensive end looks really good. Defensive tackle, we like them, but we don't know if they're going to be able to equal what Armstead was able to do. Now, of course, Armstead last year only played in 12 games and had 5 sacks. Not exactly the greatest production because he couldn't play. But I'm curious. I think we have the potential to be a really good defensive line. I don't know. I've heard people talking about 2019's defensive line. I don't know if I see that yet. If Gross-Matos is able to have tremendous success on third down rushing from the inside to go with Bosa, Floyd, and Hargrave, then yes, it's a possibility. But we have to find out. It's going to be tough to figure that out. Of course, 49ers Cutback on Believe. Please give it a 5-star rating. I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, stay safe. I remember the right way is always the 49ers way.